and not getting consistent types of policies. And that partly has to do with, in my view, the rather milk and waterish program for governments we've had. I mean, that's what, it's kind of a lowest common denominator, and so on. So I think in all of that, that is partly saying, again, the issue of recognising we are unique, both in the downsides of our unfinished peace process, some of which we've outlined here, but also, as I say, I think there's some benefits. Because I think the lessons of conflict transformation are going to be applicable in Silesia, in Eastern Germany, in North Sea, where, we cannot continue with a coal, oil and gas, particularly economy. That's going to cause friction and tension and conflict. So there is something, I think, about, more fully appreciating that this part of the world, yes, we've had a lot of problems and we still, have a lot of problems, but I do think, and I could be completely wrong, that the conflict transformation experience itself is an underused resource that we're not actually exploring enough in terms of helping us navigate some of these problems and opportunities. Remember, of course, in all of this, folks, this is about a better world for us all. And actually, we need to start investigating things like no-till farming, where we're minimally disturbing the soil to preserve its structure and its integrity, and also the biomes that exist within it. Because there is a connection, and again, I'm not a medical scientist, a connection between the biomes and nature, and actually in our own gut and our own health as well. Essentially, healthy food in healthy soil will produce healthy people. The problem is now we have too much an agricultural system based upon industrial fertilizer that's disrupting the structure of the soil, and it's actually resulting in the fact that we now have a lot of ill health. Not all to do with food, our sedentary lifestyles and so on, but definitely there's a connection between soil health and human health. And nature-based solutions work in two ways. One is adaptation. So how do we adapt our society to an inevitably warmer world, which means actually in our part of the world, more rain, more flooding? Well, you brought more trees. Part of the problem is that agricultural runoff, for example, where the trees aren't there to capture it and store it, results in flooding. And we've seen flooding in Derry, Strabane, in Newry and Portadown. I'm not saying planting more trees would have necessarily saved all of that, but it certainly would help. But also when planting trees, we sequester carbon. That's the second issue. It's what's called climate mitigation. It sucks carbon in the atmosphere, reduces global greenhouse warming. So essentially what you're talking about in terms of trees and hedgerows and so on, native plants and trees are really important. That's the issue. Not Sitka spruce, not foreign trees that may grow quickly, but actually it doesn't really add to the ecological diversity. So it has to be oak, willow, and trees like this is that we should be supporting, while also allowing some space for commercial tree growing. But essentially, just to summarise, trees in particular are really important for climate adaptation. How do we adapt, particularly in terms of flood defences, protecting our rivers and shucks from agricultural runoff in particular, but also climate mitigation. But this is a nature-based solution. We don't need carbon capture as a technology. We already have carbon capture. It's called trees. It's called nature. Well, I would say that we shouldn't individualise the problem. That was part of what I was trying to get at in my talk. People should get politically active. They should be asking politicians, looking at their vote, how to use their vote wisely. There is obvious things we can do, like, where we can, do I need the car? Can I not take public transportation? What about our dietary choices? It is really clear that a less heavy red meat and dairy diet is better for the planet and actually is better for our human health as well. It's not about mandatory veganism, but it is about saying that's something we can do. There is then the obvious in terms of what's sometimes called the waste hierarchy of the various ores. So the first thing is refuse. Don't buy. Do you need to buy this stuff? Then it's recycle, repurpose, and so on, and actually begin to see that, waste that we throw out can be repurposed. Repair cafes are growing in many of our cities across the UK and Ireland. So individuals need to really, just to finish, ask themselves the question, do I really need to buy this thing? And particularly important now because we're coming in, as we make this recording, into Christmas, or what I call the orgy of consumerism, where particularly parents like myself and you, we feel pressurised in buying stuff for our kids. And I'm not saying not to buy nice things for our kids, but that plastic junk that we often buy ends up in landfill in a couple of months' time. So it is about challenging in our own lifestyles that culture of consumerism. If we're going to buy something, we're not buy a good quality product that we can repair and repurpose and pass on and so on. So I think across our lifestyles in terms of driving, transportation, how we heat our homes, do we really need to have every home or every room in the house at 24 degrees? Using thermostats, which many people don't really understand how they work and so on. There are lots of ways in which we as individuals can reduce our own carbon footprint. But at the end of the day, it is not just our responsibility. This is a collective responsibility, particularly of government. So it's not about making people feel guilty about their lifestyle. The one I'll give you, and just to finish on this, it's not about, for example, flight shaming. If you're a well-paid professor like me, whose kids are growing up, I can take 3 days to go on the boat and the ferry and the train to London. If you're a young mom that has young children and you have a meeting in London, of course you have to fly. So I think it's about being sensible and seeing that not all of us have the opportunity of the same, choices that we can make. Or as I said in my talk, I'm a well-paid professor. I have an electric car. I have a very expensive folded bike. I have solar panels. Most people don't have that, so that cannot be the solution. That's where government has to step in to insulate our homes, for example, provide more public transportation options for people, or indeed increase, as we've seen during the pandemic and afterwards, do you need to work? I mean, the cheapest and most carbon form of energy or transport is the energy or transport you don't use. So we need to be getting to that issue of efficiency and looking at what's the best way we can make a choice that helps our pocket and helps the planet and indeed makes our lives better.
Thanks.
Waste going to landfill, that's the key issue, because when we send stuff to landfill, it can pollute rivers, like where you live in Derry, the Faughan River, that was polluted massively by the Maboy, which is an illegal site. So the more we send to landfill, it can pollute our water courses. And we are increasing in the amount of recycling, because recycled material, whereas bottles or indeed even plastics, they can be repurposed. I mean, there's no waste in nature. What we need to do is to mimic nature and take what we now see as waste and repurpose that, reuse it and so on. So essentially, waste is wasted resources. That's why you have that old Yorkshire saying, where there's muck, there's brass. In other words, we are losing value, economic value, by sending stuff to landfill. And so the blue and the brown bins are absolutely working. The blue bin obviously is paper and plastic for the most part. The brown bin is organic waste. That's really important because we can put that down to compost, put it back on the land, use it in our gardens and so on. Why on earth would you put food waste or peelings from vegetables into the grey bin that's going to landfill? It's going to cause problems. It's not that difficult. And many of us are in council areas where we have these little green caddies where we can just simply put the scrapings of food and so on in there, and that actually then can become a resource.
I'm John McAllister. I'm a dairy and beef farmer from Rathriley, County Down. I was also a past life a member of the Northern Ireland Assembly for the South Down constituency and did that for 9 years. So I'm pushing around today's theme around agriculture, food, farming and climate change and the impact. And my main I suppose topic is how do we build up that partnership that needs to happen between all sectors, that farmers don't feel that they're been asked to do all of the heavy lifting as regards addressing climate change, but that others are sharing some of that as well. So yes, the targets should and must be challenging, but they shouldn't be unrealistic and totally unachievable or decimate our agri-food industry. We have a growing world population that still needs high quality nutritious food and needs to be fed. So let's not decimate our agri-food industry unnecessarily, but let's work in a partnership to try and build up and address the huge issues of climate that we face today.